Hi there. Welcome to Grain TV. I'm Kevin McNew. It's Monday, August 22nd, another mixed day in the markets. Let's take a look at GrainEdge's trading platform and see where we closed. In Chicago, corn was down 1/4 cent, beans up 10, and wheat in Chicago losing 12. Really, there was very little news to focus on other than the start of the Pro Farmer Crop Tour this year. And this is going to take on added significance because of all the disagreement we have over USDA's August production figures. Keep in mind, USDA's calling for a 175 bushel corn yield, and Pro Farmer is going to be out in the fields, really sort of giving us that feet on the ground look at corn yield to see if we can believe a very, very large number from USDA. And starting in this tour, we have one leg of the tour that's starting on the far west in South Dakota, another leg of the tour starting in the far east in Ohio, and they are going to be working their way to the middle of the country by the end of this week. Let's start first of all with Pro Farmer East in Ohio, and in that part of the country, they saw some above average corn yields. Even though there was some adverse effects from hot and dry weather, and soybean pod counts were below what they saw this time last year. In the West, this was a different story. Pod counts for soybeans were very higher or much higher than last year, while corn yield looked to have been damaged by the excessive heat. If we look at the actual raw data coming out of the Pro Farmer Crop Tour, the corn yield coming in at 183 in Ohio versus last year at 153, and a 3-year average of 169, and in South Dakota coming in a little bit less than last year. Keep in mind that on this Pro Farmer Crop Tour, they're probably starting with the worst numbers first. So we're talking about the far western Corn Belt and the far eastern Corn Belt, where we think the yield potential is the most damaging, if you will, either from lack of rain or from excessive heat. And in particular, I think today's numbers are maybe a little disappointing for the bulls because we didn't find widespread problems like maybe some people had been hoping for. So it is at least a push on day one, probably, with corn yield coming in better than expected or better than last year in in Ohio, but worse than last year in South Dakota. And likewise on the bean numbers, when we look at bean pod counts, much higher than last year in South Dakota, a little bit worse in the case of Ohio. So again, for those of you that are bullish, this may not be a good start to the tour, because as the tour goes along, we're likely going to see better and better conditions. Turning now to export inspections for the week from USDA. These numbers were strong for soybeans, coming in at 961,000 metric tons versus expectations of 650 to 850, and corn topping the high end of analyst expectations as well, coming in just over 1.2 million metric tons. Wheat was a disappointing 530, although within analyst expectations, but at the low end, where the low end was 500,000 metric tons. Let's take a look at the daily chart in November beans. We've been talking about this 1023 mark, and especially 1020 to 1023 I think is going to be overhead resistance. And we saw that today in particular. We saw the market. We traded lower in the overnight session. We came into the morning session and quickly bounced higher for about the first 2 hours of trade. But for a good hour, we traded in that 1018 to 1020 range without any sort of significant buying interest. We just briefly touched on 1020, but once we did that, we pretty much headed south and closed in the 1015 range. So watch that number 1020, because it's going to be pivotal to keep this sort of recovery phase of the market intact. Right now, we're sort of chopping up against that 1020 mark. We did very little action, very little damage to the charts last week, which is sort of flat to slightly higher trade. So we really need, if you're in the bull camp, you really need to see some acceleration here. Otherwise, this market may lose some steam. And obviously, new fundamental input in terms of Pro Farmer's Crop Yield Tour may provide direction one way or the other. As always, if you have an interest in learning about GrainEdge's service, visit us online at grainhedge.com and see how we can help you in your own trading strategies. As a GrainEdge trading client, you'll get our technical alerts email first thing every trading day. Technical Alerts is a powerful system that generates quality trading opportunities. Each trading opportunity shows a chart and analysis providing clear price targets and risk potential. Technical alerts look at historical chart formations and compare the current environment to the past to form concrete trading recommendations. The commodities covered by technical alerts includes grains, livestock, crude oil, currencies, bonds, and metals. Start your trading day with the most powerful insight into market direction and improve your trading today. Sign up at grainhedge.com to become a client.